de la commissaire européenne et on vient de me rajouter une vice-présidente de la commission du Parlement, pardon. Donc du coup, je pense qu'on risque de démarrer à 15h30 et pas 15h20 pour la partie panel. En fait. Donc du coup, on peut vous installer sans aucun souci. C'est pour vous, hein. I'm just a moderator, so I'm not going to answer every single question every single time. Gabriel is going to deliver a keynote. Just no, because she's not on the panel. She's going to deliver a keynote.
afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please grab a seat as we're about to deep dive into this afternoon session for the European Film Forum. And this afternoon is, of course, dedicated to teaming up in many different ways. The very first one will be partnering for better distribution, and then we'll learn how to network to reach wider audiences. I'm going to need your attention. I'm going to need you to stop those side chats. Thank you very much, because it's actually time also for this very first session to join me in welcoming Mariya Gabriel, the Commissioner for Digital and Economy Society for the European Commission, for a quick keynote and introductory words.
Mesdames et Messieurs, membres du Parlement européen, Mesdames et Messieurs les présidents de fonds de soutien, Mesdames et Messieurs, hommes et femmes de culture, Mesdames et Messieurs, les membres de la famille du cinéma européen, tout d'abord, je suis à la fois honorée et très heureuse de prendre la parole devant votre illustre Assemblée à l'occasion du Festival de Cannes qui célèbre une création cinématographique libre et indépendante depuis 71 ans. C'est une grande fierté pour nous tous, Européens, de constater l'éblouissante réussite de ce festival, devenu référence mondiale du cinéma et l'écran privilégié d'œuvres cinématographiques d'exception. Je suis particulièrement heureuse d'y participer cette année, alors que la présidente du jury est une artiste extraordinaire, ce qui permet au passage de souligner encore une fois l'écart qui existe entre les hommes et les femmes, lesquels n'ont présidé le jury que 12 fois sur 71. Cette intervention est pour moi l'occasion de partager quelques réflexions sur les enjeux d'un cinéma européen fort et diversifié pour notre avenir commun, ainsi que de présenter les actions que l'Europe entreprend pour renforcer la production cinématographique. Mesdames et Messieurs, notre monde change vite et profondément. Il n'est pas de jour où nous ne voyions paraître des applications technologiques où la puissance de l'intelligence artificielle ou le blockchain ne vienne exprimer son potentiel au travers de nouvelles innovations. Mais cette transformation n'est pas que technologique. Elle est sociétale, traduisant une soif de liberté individuelle ou l'établissement enfin d'une véritable égalité entre hommes et femmes. Au-delà, cette transformation est aussi géopolitique, avec une recomposition des rapports de force et des positionnements entre les grandes puissances mondiales. Jamais sans doute les opportunités n'auront été aussi grandes pour les citoyens, les entreprises et les artistes. Mais ces changements comportent aussi d'importants défis d'adaptation pour nos économies, nos sociétés et les hommes et les femmes qui en font partie. Vous pourriez me dire que tout ceci est bien éloigné des enjeux du cinéma dans nos sociétés, thème qui nous rassemble aujourd'hui. C'est tout le contraire. Le cinéma est au cœur de ces défis et de la solution aux problèmes qui se posent. Pour le comprendre, je vous propose de revenir à la source du mot « culture ». Le premier à appliquer ce terme aux êtres humains était Cicéron, qui écrivait en 45 avant Jésus-Christ « Un champ si fertile soit-il ne peut être productif sans culture. » Et c'est la même chose pour l'humain sans enseignement. Cicéron avait vu juste. L'humain ne se fait pas par lui-même. Il implique un travail personnel au contact du savoir. La culture est l'enseignement de l'âme qui permet à un homme ou à une femme d'aller au bout de son humanité, de produire du fruit, de raffermir ses valeurs, notamment l'ouverture aux autres, et d'aiguiser son jugement sur les choses et les comportements. En effet, jamais les hommes et les femmes n'ont eu autant besoin de ces qualités qu'aujourd'hui pour s'orienter dans ces transformations et trouver leur place dans ce monde. À l'heure de la désinformation, de la réalité virtuelle et de l'intelligence artificielle, la culture n'est plus simplement utile ou flatteuse. Elle est essentielle. Personnellement, je tire 2 grandes conclusions liminaires. D'abord, notre attention politique doit prioritairement se porter vers nos citoyens pour les équiper avec les outils donnés par l'éducation et la culture et ainsi assurer qu'ils aient toutes les chances pour réussir leur vie à l'heure du numérique. L'enjeu n'est pas simplement individuel. Il s'agit du faire du collectif avec des individus autonomes et indépendants, dans une société de plus en plus horizontale. À cet égard, la culture est essentielle à la survie de nos valeurs communes sur lesquelles sont fondées nos sociétés européennes. Ceci nous amène tout naturellement au cinéma. Il reste le véhicule culturel préféré des Européens, celui qui permet de toucher le plus grand nombre, de créer du collectif à partir d'histoires singulières, d'assurer l'adhésion à nos valeurs fondamentales et de contribuer à la compréhension mutuelle par-delà les frontières. Comment faire mieux qu'un film comme I, Daniel Blake pour révéler les tensions qui traversent nos sociétés et ainsi aider le politique à les traiter afin d'essayer de prévenir la montée du nationalisme, voire à terme du totalitarisme. Mesdames et messieurs, dans un tel contexte, le rôle de l'Europe pour soutenir la production cinématographique ne peut faiblir. Il doit s'attacher à promouvoir la création, car il n'y a point d'œuvre sans artistes, tout autant que la distribution et la transition numérique du secteur. C'est tout l'enjeu de notre stratégie Digital for Culture, numérique pour la culture, que j'ai présentée à Berlinale. Aujourd'hui, je suis très heureuse de vous confirmer l'engagement de la Commission européenne et de partager 3 avancées majeures récentes. D'abord, l'engagement de la Commission a augmenté de manière substantielle son soutien financier au secteur du cinéma. Dans un contexte budgétaire mis à rude épreuve par la contrainte du Brexit, la Commission a récemment fait des propositions audacieuses pour renforcer significativement son soutien financier au secteur audiovisuel via le programme Média. Fidèle à l'engagement que j'ai pris personnellement devant vous à Venise, je suis très heureuse de pouvoir défendre une enveloppe ambitieuse pour ce programme. La mobilisation coordonnée du secteur a porté ses fruits. La proposition toute récente adoptée par la Commission européenne consacre une hausse importante du programme Média de 30% qui porte ainsi le budget à 1,2 milliard d'euros pour la période 2020-2027. Le chemin sera encore long pour faire de cette proposition une réalité. La décision finale incombant au Parlement européen et aux États membres. Mais je serai à vos côtés pour continuer à me battre pour obtenir une enveloppe finale qui soit à la hauteur de nos ambitions. À cet égard, je me réjouis de voir les membres du Parlement européen ici présents, Madame Gebhardt, la vice-présidente. Nous aurons besoin de vous. Soyez assurés de notre mobilisation, de ma pleine mobilisation pour travailler avec vous main dans la main. Nous ne manquons pas d'arguments pour assurer que la négociation aille dans la bonne direction, avec l'acquis de la distribution transfrontalière de plus de 400 films par an, l'accès à près de 65 millions d'entrées annuelles, le réseau d'exploitants indépendants Europa Cinéma, qui a dynamisé l'exposition des films européens de manière rentable, ou encore le soutien aux PME indépendantes qui constituent l'essentiel de l'industrie audiovisuelle européenne. Mais nous entendons aussi faire évoluer ce programme pour répondre aux défis actuels et cibler nos actions sur la valeur ajoutée européenne. Nous devons soutenir le développement d'une production européenne capable de rivaliser avec les grandes productions non européennes, utiliser les nouvelles technologies telles que la réalité virtuelle, soutenir le marketing, la promotion et les stratégies de distribution, accompagner la mise en œuvre de la directive sur les services de médias audiovisuels et promouvoir les valeurs européennes à travers le continent et au niveau mondial. Je ne manquerai pas de vous tenir informés des propositions détaillées qui seront publiées prochainement par la Commission. Deuxième bonne nouvelle, nous déployons un effort accru pour valoriser notre patrimoine cinématographique commun. La protection de notre patrimoine est un enjeu qui a bien plus à voir avec la construction de notre présent et de notre futur qu'avec notre passé. C'est la préservation de nos sociétés libres et ouvertes sur le monde qui est en jeu. Comme l'écrivait l'abbé Grégoire en 1794, dans son manifeste pour contrer les velléités de destruction des bâtiments historiques de l'Ancien Régime. Une société ne peut être libre que si elle comporte en son sein le florissement de la créativité artistique, la tolérance et l'éducation. Se référant à la protection du patrimoine, il conclut, et je le cite, « Les barbares et les esclaves détestent les sciences et détruisent les monuments des arts. Les hommes libres les aiment et les conservent. Je suis profondément convaincue que le futur d'une Europe libre, démocratique et inclusive dépend de notre capacité à protéger notre patrimoine culturel passé qui consacre la créativité des artistes au-delà des systèmes. Mesdames et messieurs, dans cette année européenne du patrimoine culturel, je souhaite attirer votre attention sur quelques-unes des initiatives qui me tiennent particulièrement à cœur. De nouveau, conformément aux engagements que j'ai pris avec les cinéastes lors de nos échanges à Berlin, à Bruxelles ensuite, et ici même ce matin, je souhaite lancer dès cette année un prototype de répertoire des œuvres audiovisuelles européennes. Un tel outil constitue une illustration de la synergie possible entre technologie numérique et la diffusion de la culture. Le répertoire permettra de mieux connaître l'état d'exploitation et de distribution de nos films européens dans chacun de nos territoires. La mise en œuvre se fera par étapes. Le répertoire sera d'abord un outil destiné aux professionnels, mais j'espère qu'il pourra donner lieu au développement d'un écosystème de services qui bénéficiera au grand public. La protection de notre patrimoine passe aussi par le développement des audiences, et en particulier par les actions d'éducation au film auprès des jeunes, en particulier les adolescents. C'est la raison pour laquelle un appel d'offres couvrant l'organisation de projections d'œuvres de patrimoine en lien avec les établissements scolaires, ainsi que leur restauration, sera mis en place en 2018 dans le cadre du schéma de soutien d'éducation au film du programme Média. Je vous donne rendez-vous à Lyon en octobre pour une discussion plus approfondie sur ce sujet. Enfin, la protection du patrimoine en Europe doit s'inscrire dans une réflexion sur les pratiques, car comme souvent en Europe, la manière compte autant que la chose. De même qu'il est impossible de réduire la gastronomie à une succession de mets, la rencontre entre un film et un spectateur n'est complète que lorsqu'elle comporte une dimension sociale, fondée sur une expérience collective, le partage des émotions et des expériences. Je suis confiante que dans notre capacité d'explorer des synergies et des modèles alternatifs pour assurer que les films ne soient pas vus uniquement dans des chambres et des salons, tout en faisant preuve d'innovation. C'est aussi l'un des chantiers du futur programme Média. Enfin, troisième bonne nouvelle, le succès de la modernisation de nos réglementations pour renforcer l'audiovisuel à l'heure numérique. Le secteur audiovisuel, plus que tout autre, se trouve à la croisée des chemins entre la culture et le numérique. La montée des plateformes en ligne et l'émergence de nouveaux modes de consommation rendaient nécessaire la modernisation de plusieurs de nos textes de loi européens. La Commission a fait des propositions très ambitieuses pour mieux défendre les droits d'auteur et l'organisation d'un juste partage de la valeur qui en est le nécessaire corollaire. Les négociations avancent dans la bonne direction et nous travaillons à obtenir un bon accord dans les mois qui viennent. Enfin, je suis extrêmement satisfaite par les dernières discussions politiques sur la modernisation de la directive Services de médias audiovisuels qui ouvre d'excellentes perspectives pour le secteur. La réalité est que l'Europe a décidé de se doter de la réglementation la plus ambitieuse au monde pour favoriser la création cinématographique. À la fin du mois dernier, l'accord politique sur la directive Services de médias audiovisuels pose en effet les fondations d'un dispositif qui s'appliquera pas seulement aux diffuseurs et aux services à la demande, mais aussi aux plateformes de partage de vidéos en ligne et de retransmission en direct. Afin de soutenir la diversité culturelle du secteur audiovisuel européen, la promotion des œuvres européennes sera garantie pour la première fois dans les catalogues à la demande, en réservant une part d'au moins 30% au contenu européen. Ces nouvelles règles établissent aussi la possibilité pour les États membres d'imposer des contributions financières aux fournisseurs de services de médias, y compris ceux établis dans un autre État membre, mais visant leurs publics nationaux, par le biais d'investissements directs ou de contributions aux fonds nationaux. Le niveau de contribution dans chaque pays devra ainsi être proportionnel aux bénéfices réalisés par les plateformes dans cet État. Voilà encore une fois le signe concret d'une Europe qui avance. Au moment où je dois conclure, je voudrais adresser à chacun d'entre vous mes remerciements sincères pour votre passion, votre inspiration et l'élan porteur qu'elle imprime dans nos sociétés. Car, in fine, cette créativité que nous cherchons à favoriser, c'est vous qui en êtes les auteurs et les bâtisseurs. Soyez assurés que vous pouvez compter sur ma passion de la culture, des œuvres et par-dessus tout des hommes et des femmes qui les réalisent pour soutenir vos efforts. J'aimerais enfin terminer mon propos par un appel à l'ambition, à la fierté et à l'assertivité. Dans ces évolutions en cours, je crois avoir illustré que l'Europe pense et agit concrètement. Elle montre un chemin qui lui est propre, fondé sur un équilibre entre innovation et valeur. Cette approche impose parfois des choix radicaux, comme celui que nous avons fait pour protéger la vie privée des utilisateurs de l'Internet. Mais j'ai confiance dans le fait que ces choix se révèlent payants, comme l'illustre dès à présent l'affaire impliquant Facebook et Cambridge Analytica. J'ai la profonde conviction que ce chemin que l'Europe trace autour de ses valeurs et qui repose notamment sur une création artistique diversifiée, dynamique et innovante est le bon. C'est même le seul possible, car il porte une ambition stratégique, rendre nos sociétés plus fortes en assurant que tous, et non pas simplement un petit nombre, profitent d'un avenir meilleur. Je vous remercie et je voudrais vous souhaiter chaleureusement un festival fructueux. Merci.
Merci infiniment, Madame la Commissaire. And now, please join me in welcoming on this very stage the Vice President of the European Parliament, Ms. Gebhardt.
Merci beaucoup pour cet accueil chaleureux. Et je dois dire un grand merci à Madame la Commissaire qui fait un travail magnifique. Et je peux dire qu'en tant que vice-présidente du Parlement européen et au nom du président, M. Tajani, je peux vous dire que vous aurez tout le soutien nécessaire dans le contexte des dures discussions que nous allons avoir en ce qui concerne l'argent à venir et surtout le programme média, parce que ça, c'est un des programmes les plus importants et les plus nécessaires dans notre vie politique d'aujourd'hui, dans notre société. Car dans notre société d'aujourd'hui où nous voyons tant de discussions sur l'avenir de l'Europe, quelle est cette Europe que nous voulons? Dans quel sens doit-elle aller? Les médias, les gens qui sont ici, les cinéastes, jouent un rôle énorme, primordial. Parce qu'il s'agit aussi ici, non seulement de payer les cinéastes, de faire en sorte que nous ayons de beaux films, il s'agit aussi de révéler les valeurs, les richesses culturelles que nous aurons dans l'Union européenne. Et de le faire, et de faire en sorte que cela soit la base de notre avenir, la base dans laquelle nous voulons vivre, dans les valeurs que nous avons, les valeurs de liberté d'expression, les valeurs de la liberté de la presse, les valeurs des droits des citoyens et des citoyennes, les valeurs de la justice impartiale et non gouvernée par les politiques. Tout cela, c'est aussi ce que représente le travail qui est fait ici. Et pour cela, nous devons faire en sorte que ce travail soit protégé, soit aidé, soit mis en avant, parce que nous avons besoin de cette Europe. La manière dont nous vivons aujourd'hui, ce sont les valeurs, c'est l'identité européenne que nous avons aujourd'hui. Et cette identité européenne, nous devons la souscrire, nous devons lui donner une perspective, aussi une vue. Et pour cela, nous travaillons ensemble et je vous remercie tous à ce travail énorme qui est fait de manière à ce que nous ayons une vie depuis maintenant plus de 70 ans dans une Europe qui se rapproche de plus en plus de faire en sorte que nous vivions encore de nombreuses années et même des siècles de paix, car c'est cela qui est le meilleur que nous puissions faire. Merci beaucoup.
Merci à vous, Madame la Vice-Présidente. So I'm really happy that we're actually opening this afternoon discussion with great news and great hopes at the same time. And it's actually the next focus we're going to have when it comes to the distribution scheme. Partnering for better distribution and exploring the best way to collaborate when distributing European works, of course. Our next guests are definitely part of the distribution value chain. You'll see that some are studying it closely, some are disrupting it, but at the end of the day, they all have great ideas and believe in join-up collaboration strategies to bring content to wider audiences. So also, is it the right time to partner for better distribution? To learn more about it, I'm really pleased to be joined on stage by William Page, the co-founder of Filmdoo, Annemie Degryse, the CEO of Studio Lumière, Lunamine, Jean-Christophe Simon, the president of Europa International, and Jeanne Brunfaut for the fund from the French community of Belgium. Please grab a seat and a mic. Watch your steps and seats though, but we're actually going to tour first around the panel so we'll have a perfect idea of what part you're actually playing in this distribution ecosystem, because we have a VOD platform around the table, an animation studio and producer, a producer and distributor association, and a fund. So from your perspective, actually, is it still relevant to have this type of distribution scheme, especially when our audiences are changing so fast when it comes to their content behavior? Maybe first, Jean-Christophe.
Well, good afternoon. Actually, talking about distribution, I think we are all here because actually the system is pretty well working. So it's something which is very valuable, and it's something we should defend because, we as a sales agent, we are working with distributors all around the planet, and we should say that everybody is jealous of the European system. So as a starting point, I think it's very important to say that it works, and the question is just, can we make it work better, and maybe try to go deeper to reach certain audiences, which is one of the key points.
Absolutely. What about you? What about Filmdoo?
Yeah, so I completely agree with what was just said. We believe technology has an incredible ability to act as an enabler in leveling the playing field and in reaching audiences that are otherwise very difficult or we're unable to reach. One of the problems that we have in Europe and actually outside of Hollywood is we don't have the level of marketing support and funding that the American studios have. So I think technology has a real ability to actually help us to reach audience more effectively, more cost-effectively, more efficiently, and to help smaller and more hard-to-find content to be seen and heard. So I think it's a very exciting time for European content.
Is it also a very exciting time from an animation studio perspective with you, actually, Annemie?
Well, we are more than just an animation studio. Actually, Lumière is a kind of a group name for an animation studio, for fiction producer, but also for as a distributor on the Benelux. And we own as well cinemas. So still today we own cinemas, and we're building another one, since we are absolutely convinced that audience is wants cinemas and or maybe more and more into going to cinema, because audiences want what was just said. They want all together go to cinema and have the same experience of seeing movies. So media has been a long partner within all our activities, as well as a distributor, as a producer, but also as cinemas. We have been helped by the cinema part as well. Anyhow, so yeah, it is absolutely working, and I think the way that it is going today is even better.
Wow, actually, still hoping, still great news. We'll dive onto it, especially when it comes to the value chain. Jeanne, when it comes to a fund perspective, is the systems working too?
Well, yeah, it's working, but it could still be better. And that's the job of the funds, is to think ahead and to think about what could be improved and what regulations we have to change. And we have an organization which is called the IFADS, which gathers all the film funds in Europe. And we think about that. We think about the fact that we have to reach the audience better. And so we're trying to find ways to share best practices. And I must say that when we say it's an exciting time, I mean, that's not even enough to say that. It's a great time now to think, with the increase of the media program budget, which hopefully will arise, and also the AVMS directive. I mean, we're right in the middle of a great time where we need to rethink the entire ecosystem and really do it all together in order to be sure to reach our goals.
So actually, speaking of cooperation, how can we enhance this type of cooperation inside the European Union? Every single state member has its own media chronology, its own rules, its own legislation, and that's the reason why supranational legislation and regulation or frameworks such as the media program and the Directive SMA are sometimes taking over so that we can have a better coherence on what we're trying to achieve here. But from each of you perspective, what would be the best way, the best tool, the best process to enhance this cooperation? Sure, William.
Yeah, it's a great question to ask, because it's actually good timing for us. So Eurovod, which is an association of what was originally a collective, I guess you could call it, of a few platforms, has actually just been relaunched and expanded. So it's now an association of platforms, which is really super exciting. I think it's about 15 platforms we're looking to have.
Platforms of platforms?
Platforms, sorry.
No, but a platform of platforms.
No, it won't be, at least not at this stage, it'll be a platform. It'll just be an association. But the key is that we will collaborate to work more closely together, to sharing resources, to sharing know-how, and also to potentially work with sales agents and distributors to actually license content more effectively across multiple jurisdictions. And that's certainly something that we're exploring. So I think we need to be completely frank with everyone here, we need to work together collectively to pool our resources, to use technology, because it's the only way that we're going to be able to counter much larger American influence, where they have much. I mean, we all love American films, but they have much more significant money behind them. So the only way that we're going to level the playing field is by working and collaborating together.
What, Heidi, can we come up with also for better cooperation? Annemie?
Well, as you said, it's a very interesting time. And at the same time, it's also a time where we don't know where we go to. So we are, in a way, we have a lot of possibilities, which we hadn't, like, even 6 months ago. I think that every 6 months something new is coming up, and I think that we need to be. It's very difficult to see ahead. If I talk with a lot of CEOs from big companies, it's like we think we know, but we don't know. So I think to really reach is to be open to look ahead, to try to look ahead. What do you think? And talk to each other. I mean, people that are into the business, deep into the business, what are you thinking, what are you doing, and what are we doing? What is the content side? What do we want? And in the end, the producer wants to reach a public, and the platforms and the cinemas and everyone wants to reach an audience. And it's the audience that is the drive for us to proceed with what we try to do. And there were, like a couple of years ago, we had a direct link with our audience through DVD market. We lost that today because we don't have metadata to know where we are going to. So our goal is to try to reach the audience again through the new platforms, and that's by collaborating with everyone here, and I mean it's without the sales agent we can't do our works. Without the producer, it's really more and more a collaborative issue.
And I'm pretty sure that William will have perfect examples or answers when it comes to metadata in a few seconds. But yeah, if I pay close attention to what you're trying to say here, is seizing opportunities is a question of listening to each other and trying to partner and teaming up all together so that everyone in the value chain or on the value chain can have a better idea of what the others are doing. Jeanne, what other ideas can we come up with?
Well, I think in terms of cooperation, you have two levels. First, it's inside, it's national cooperation. I think that's one of the tasks of the film funds, is to listen to its professionals. So, for instance, in Belgium, I mean, it's a small country, so it's quite easy to do, but every 2 months we have a meeting with all the professionals, all the associations, distributors, broadcasters, producers, writers, and so we think together about what's working and what's not working and what should be removed and improved and everything. It's easy because we're not that many, and I guess it's not that easy to do it in Germany or in England, but it's something that keeps the system flexible because we can change things. It's not done once and forever, and then there is the collaboration between the film funds, between the film funds and other film funds outside Europe, because there is also things to do with Latin America, with North Africa, and it's really a collaboration that needs to be done at several levels. But I think, I mean, we know much more the associations now that we used to, like 10 years ago. Now I think we talk to each other all the time. Sometimes we say the same things all the time, and sometimes we feel we are in the same meeting for ages. But sometimes it's useful, so we need to keep doing it.
So actually, Jean-Christophe, from your perspective, is flexibility the secret ingredient that actually lacks in this already good recipe when it comes to European distribution, but that could be better in the near future?
I think flexibility is not even a question. I mean, when we are seeing what's happening now, I mean, if we just stay as we were doing it before, it's just that it will not work. I mean, it's we see that we are on the way losing a part of the audience going to cinema. So it's at some point we have to reinvent the way we are working. At the same time, I think, for example, Annemie was mentioning the fact that. When the DVD market collapsed some years ago, it was really a catastrophe for distributors, for example. I think actually the arrival of the platform with all the questions, all the problems, and sometimes maybe some solutions which it's bringing, actually had an interesting impact as well, because TVs were fading away. So now we see that TVs start to invest again, try to defend their position, and are back in the game. So in this side, it's true that we see that the competency between companies, and sometimes with much bigger US companies, it's still something which can be valuable as well on a local aspect, in my point of view. And the last thing is, it's true that we are meeting regularly, I mean, with sales companies, with distributors, with cinema, trying to really break the rules and think what we can do after. I think we have a great opportunity now with social media, sometime maybe with a platform to reach people with content that we could never reach before. It's very interesting, for example, that to see that now the younger audience, sometimes they don't notice anymore that some series, they are subtitled. In some countries, if we would have the same conversation 10 years ago or 20 years ago, everything was dubbed. And if it was with subtitles, it was boring. So you were not really looking at it. So there is a change going on, and I think it's very interesting, for example, to see that the younger audience start to read subtitling again, as an example.
Which definitely brings us to the next question, because actually, so. Of course, there is this ongoing conversation and information that flows everywhere in social media, on platforms, on television, in theaters, festivals, about new movie releases. But every single member of state is on media chronology. And I know the story is pretty hot right now, especially when it comes to the French media chronology. But isn't it another way to maybe reconsider the idea of simultaneous releases? Because we can think about, territories where a content is going to be launched, and that audiences maybe on the next border are craving to actually have access to this content too. So how can we also maybe use this simultaneous release as a powerful tool to bring, and to reach all your audiences first? Is it a good way to transform distribution?
It's a good way, but I think, in my opinion, it's very dangerous to mention every country is like this in a talk, because I think every countries are different. Some of them have systems which work so powerfully that it would be absurd to change the way it works. Maybe it needs more flexibility, some changes, adaptation, or rules and regulations, that's fine. But I think one of the... It's very interesting to see that the media chronology, films, if we talk about cinema, films are prototypes. So it's not like one film is the same as the other one. That could be the mistake to think it this way. So I do think that some films maybe can have a great success on a platform, and maybe just a few festival events or screenings. And some of the films, they really need to have a proper, traditional and strong theatrical distribution, which is what we all like, and I guess to a certain extent the reason why we all do this job. But it's very important to consider that there is not good things on one hand and evil on the other side. I think it's more complicated than that, and we have to be intelligent in the way we deal with this.
So how can we be smarter into dealing with it, Annemie?
Oh dear. No, be smarter. I think the only thing that you can do is being awake and looking around and thinking out of the box is the only thing that you can do. And if you say Windows and how we used to work, that's not the way you should take it. I mean, it's not because we did it last time that next time we should do it again, that's for sure. Especially when I see how we have been evaluating from a traditional distributor to what we are today. We are all I think that we are today also in a kind of, we all want to go for good content. And content is more than a good cinema movie and TV. Today we are in good stories, and people want to see good stories. Good stories can be 15 minutes, can be 8 hours, can be something completely different. Also there, the content makers are thinking out of the box, are thinking more into, I want to go for a platform for this and such, and then something else. And in Europe, you can say, well, it's for everyone the same. No, it isn't. There were, it's our weakness in Europe, it's our strength as well, because we are different and we cannot say we'll do it everywhere the same. So it's, yeah, it's again collaborating, it's looking around, it's thinking out of the box. That's the most, I think, the smartest part of the thing.
Jeanne, what is your perspective on this coordinated releases?
Well, I think if we could solve the media chronology problem, we'd be hired by the French Ministry of Culture. So I don't think anyone has the answer. But I think, as I said before, we need to try to remain flexible. In Belgium, we don't have a media chronology as such. We just follow the French one. But this is quite a good arrangement, because then we use it, but when we don't want to use it, we can't. So, for instance, we have launched a call for projects for support for production, where you don't need to have theatrical release. What we support is the content. We don't care where it goes. It needs to go somewhere, on VOD, wherever, smartphones, wherever. But what we want is an innovative content. And maybe it's going through all those weird experiences that we might actually reach a wider audience. While, as you said, theatrical release is something that we need to keep media chronology as an objective, which is that there is a value chain and that everyone has to be part of it. But still, we have to see if we can be some kind of, a little bit creative to find other ways also to reach the audience.
And actually, speaking about being creative, is not only a question of timing when it comes to coordinated releases. It's also a question of geography, but it's also a question of screen, plurals, I mean screens, devices, platforms where you're actually going to be able to reach that content. So one of our guests who has been disrupting, actually, the system is definitely you, William, with Filmdoo when you created it at the time. But again, what is the secret ingredient here we're missing to try to make the most of every single screen? Again, every single places where audiences can reach that content.
Gosh, that's quite a question.
You have 2 hours now.
Yeah. Okay, a few components. I think data, first and foremost, is crucial. One of the reasons Netflix is so successful is because they really closely guard and protect their data.
Oh, they're protected so much.
And they don't share that with anyone.
Exactly.
Amazon share a little bit more, but not much. So I do think we need to work, and the efforts of Creative Europe and the Commission are certainly looking to do more in this space, which is great. So I think we need to share and cooperate data as much as we can within the legal boundaries of doing so. We are certainly pushing, with the support of Creative Europe, we developed a piece of technology, which is a metadata piece of technology, which actually creates all the metadata for films and video content. And the reason that we did that was, what we found was that people were giving us content and they had no metadata. And what metadata is probably a word you will hear regularly and you're thinking, what the heck is that? Metadata is data about something. So it's everything from basic data, so cast, crew, director, all the way through to sensitive content, nudity, swearing, violence, brands, facial expressions. So we've created a piece of technology that automates that, and the reason it's important is because in order to recommend good content, you have to have good data, because the data creates the sets between the content, and it helps it to be discovered and curated and recommended.
And you also have to have a very precise question on what you want to do with this data, right?
Exactly right. So I think the European Union's efforts in the technology space, with in particular their online distribution, which is the call that we were supported on, is definitely going in the right way. But it really comes down to innovation. It comes down to disruptive technologies. People are mentioning blockchain. That's certainly a solution, but it's how we create this level playing field.
I was definitely about to follow up with a blockchain question. Blockchain for distribution. How can we think about it? Because we know actually now about how to use blockchain for rights and for management rights. I remember a few weeks ago, I was actually here in Cannes for MUBI TV, and we had this great debate about blockchain when it comes to democratizing the content creation. So we can use blockchain for numerous things. I think the best thing to just bear in mind is that we're living in a centralized world when it comes to Netflix platforms, television, cinema, and this industry, and we have to think out of the box and decentralized with the blockchain. And we're then going to shift from a data economy to a token economy. But all that being said, would blockchain definitely help us to be more flexible and to be more secure in the distribution value chain?
Yeah, absolutely, potentially. I think the technology is still in its infancy, ironically. I know of about 10 different startups working in blockchain for film. We're talking to them all in various forms. But I think we've still got a long way to go. And I think the same with VOD, by the way. VOD is not where it needs to be yet. It's got a lot more to go before it really reaches its maximum potential. So I think it's going to be an interesting space, but it's complicated.
Yeah, it's maybe for the next 10 years to come or so. But if we are coming back to today and actually what we can do to activate better distribution and every single segment of the value chain together, and deep diving into this question of data, how can small producers and distributors invest in building capacity for collecting data?
But I think if we had
if
we had that secret, we wouldn't be here
discussing it. Okay, sure. But it's definitely something we should aim at, right?
Yeah, it's definitely something that we try to. Well, if I can look into what we try to do, having the data is we launched an SVOD an EST platform on the Benelux. We try with our subscriptions to know who, what, but then we are very in a smaller area where at least we know where we started. So it's not large, but for us it's very important to know who is the subscriber. It's actually what we try to do is with the new technologies, we try to do the same thing as we did with DVD. How did we market? How did we reach our audience at that time? And how can we implement that with the new technology?
So it's again a question about learning from each other. And in this very case, learning about your audiences to know them better and then reach them at the very time and on the very screen they need to be reached, right?
Yeah. We just launched a survey that they could answer. Since we are releasing a lot of Scandinavian crimes, they could reply on which Scandinavian character are you? And then we had a lot of questions, and we hope that, well, it's launched, so we hope to have a lot of answers. Then at least we know who is our audience for the moment.
Jean-Christophe, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, maybe just talking about data, because I think of course, it's a very important part of all of our talks, but I think a big part it's about ideas and having like marketing ideas, which is maybe the starting point, because we have the chance to work with distributors who still are doing their job very well. They know their audience, they know how to position a film. So after, maybe we can be more creative and so on, but still we have like a part of the value which is well done, I would say. On the other side, we have people having cinemas, which are really having something very different because they can connect directly with their audience. So at some point, they have this direct contact where people can come to the cinema and the theaters because they rely on the taste of the cinema, which is around the corner. So I think it's a very important part of the value chain. And there is a little issue with data as far as we talk about films. It's very easy if you are doing Spider-Man 5 to know that it will work because you have Spider-Man 4 and Spider-Man 3. But the thing is, like, if you want to do something new, you don't know that it will work. You were mentioning Scandinavian films. We have, with my company, we have a Scandinavian films in official selection here, which is called Border. Border is it's a love story between two trolls. I can tell you that you don't have any data about how works the love stories with trolls. So at some point, all distributors are trying to fight to get this film. Everybody is excited, the press is excited. But the real life is we have no clue if the audience will be interested at the end. And distributors will try, talking with theaters and so on, to create a strategy to make it work. So maybe if we have another love troll story next time, it will be something where the data operates. But at this point, it's not the case.
But actually, not mentioning the love story of trolls, if we do actually follow up on this data marketing type of case, how can we activate better social media actually to bridge the gap between the theater releases and the platform releases, or maybe also what we can activate in terms of behaviors for audiences through social medias?
That's a really great point. I think the data is going to enable us to understand our audiences much more effectively, to be able to categorize our audiences. We still need to take risks, just because, you know, the problem with data is if you keep following the data, eventually you go down a path and you forget about all the other potential paths that you can go down. I know something that we're doing and a few other companies are doing is trying to develop audience profiles and matching them to the data that we have so that we can better market and talk to them. I think the other thing that we need to do, which we probably are a little bit slow in adapting to, is looking at other successful industries like esports and e-gaming, where I mean, it's absolutely crazy. You get people filling out 60,000 people in a stadium, people going in, watching people play computer games on stage, and millions, tens of millions of people watch this online. So I think the initiatives that, for example, Annemie is talking about are really, really interesting around, you know, games and reaching out to youth audiences and trying to find ways to be really creative in how we adapt to our audience and we utilize the content that we have so that it reaches them more effectively.
Flexibility again, I guess.
Yeah.
So actually, yeah, it's quite difficult to predict the individual success of each single film, even for troll love stories, apparently. But could the objective, in some way, of better circulation be more strongly integrated in national film policies? Can we actually build on local and national policies so that we can actually grow our work stronger among other the distribution value chain, basically?
Well, I think that's what film funds try to do. I mean, they try to build local first and then see how it can travel. Just going back to data, I think it's very necessary, at least for the film funds, to have the more data they can have, because that's how they can build a cultural policy. They need to know more. But on the other hand, it should not be that important regarding the content of the works that are supported, because what we need to have is a diversified portfolio of films. And we don't want to support films because we know that we have seen that people would love stories between trolls. Because otherwise we will only be supporting those kind of great films. So we need to really keep the idea of what is the richness of the European cinema is the fact that it's very diversified and that you can never say, as you can say with an American film, oh, that's European. No, it's not European, it's Italian or it's Polish and so I think it's something that we have to preserve.
But actually, keeping the distribution question background, are data able to capture this diversity when it comes to European work, William? Can we capture the diversity and the amount of super different and diverse type of works through data? And can we actually enhance them?
Yeah, absolutely. No, we can. So, so for example, what we're doing is we're categorizing according to so many primary, secondary, and tertiary data points. So everything from languages that are spoken in the film, cultural aspects, and all the way through to different types of secondary and tertiary data. And I think that data is potentially actually has huge potential to be utilized in other ways. So, for example, around language learning, we think, we personally as a company believe that we're missing a trick here in terms of raising awareness of languages and cultures. We are a collection of 28 countries with very different diverse languages and cultures. We should be celebrating that. And that's what film is. And I couldn't agree more with what you said. I mean, we have to be careful that we don't go down a line, and we need diversity. And data has the ability to capture that diversity and enable us to program, curate, recommend, and crucially market more effectively.
And I also get that this type of diversity gave you a new business opportunity when it comes to using those multilingual type of movies for education.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely right. Yeah. So we stumbled across something which is actually driven by the data. What happened was we've got quite a large French library. And a lot of people were coming to our French library, our Spanish pages to learn to watch foreign language films. And we just did surveys in the same way that and we mentioned you should do. And we did surveys that said, why are you watching this film? And people said 70%, depending on the language, between 65 and 85, said to learn the language and to watch and to learn the culture. And we thought, well, that's really interesting. People are watching the film with subtitles, not in dubbed, to learn the language and the culture, and that's where the opportunity lies. So that's where we as a business are moving. We're moving away from just being a VOD platform. Yeah,
absolutely. But it was just to highlight the fact that following the data sometimes opens new business opportunities and new lines of distribution.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. So if we come back actually to the fund question and to the national film funds, how much priority, for instance, Jeanne, do you give to European co-production and cross-border distribution? And how can you make this a little bit stronger?
Well, I guess you've all seen the study of the observatories showing that co-productions travel much better than 100% national films. So I think we're all very much into co-production. First, because it brings money. Second, because it brings expertise and talents. And because it enriches the films. I mean, it really brings something, an added value, which is an artistic added value. So we do it more and more, and especially for small countries, of course. We could still make it easy, even though, I mean, I already want to answer to those who are going to say, those producers saying it's too difficult, the rules are different in each country. Well, yeah, guys, that's the point. You have to manage with that because we all have our own, restrictions, and so you have to deal with that. But otherwise, it's working quite well. And when you see how much they travel and how well they are performing in festivals, I mean, co-production is the key. That's for sure.
And by the way, and the question, of course, is open to every single member of the panel, but can you just remind us more specifically what are the key criteria to identify films that have a potential to travel?
That's also a weird question. Well, we don't, when we support a co-production, at least in my fund, we do not think about it's going to travel. Well, the first criteria is the quality of the scenario. That's the first one. Then the cast, the director, the subject. We have this group which was set up by the European Commission and the Council regarding the circulation of non-national European films. And it really showed that what people are looking for is great topics, great films, the content, and of course the director, the cast. So those are all the items that will contribute to the fact that the film will circulate better. But we do not usually, we wouldn't support a film that is going, that we think is going to be, you know, circulating well, while we do not actually believe in the real quality of the script. We will never do that.
So it's more a subjective type of criteria than very, you know, like strongly written type of criteria. Jean-Christophe, you wanted to jump in?
Well, of course, it's about subjectivity, but we are, well, I don't know for you, but personally, I mean, my company, we are receiving 700 films or projects per year, which is really a lot. And actually, when you read the script, watch the film, you already see directly a few voices that get out. So I don't know if I can call it data acquisition, but it's already getting out by, I mean, because you see that there is something special. It's true that we are different as sales companies, as a firm, because technically our job is to try to identify even what will travel. That's how we make our living. The thing is, still, it's important to think that some films are prototypes. So you can predict, but it's the same thing when we were talking about data's algorithm. Yeah. Algorithm can only predict the past. You go on Amazon, it will predict so you like this, you will like this. A friend of mine went on Amazon, and Amazon at some point recommended him to buy the book he's written himself. So, of course, it's great, but you want to discover something new. So you have these things that you want to reproduce the past. At the same time, it's true that if you like that, you might be interested in this, which is something interesting. But I think we all want to be surprised. I will give you a perfect European cinema example. The film called Intouchables, which is, I think, one of the, or maybe the biggest European success, at least for a non-English speaking film, internationally. Intouchable is very interesting because in many of the countries, it was, let's say, not the logical distributors, because they were considering that you had a disabled man, you have somebody with often with no African origin on script. So when you look at it, you think like, oh, it's not what works normally. And at the end, it's precisely because this film is different that it becomes an advantage. And the funny story with Intouchable is all the companies which were conservative at this, for this film, I'd say it changed totally the game between distributors and so on in different countries, because it changed everything.
Flexibility, what can I say more than this?
Well, I think it's also about being moved by a story, and you can be moved because you needed to laugh, or you've been moved because it's sad, but it must do something with you as a person when you read it, when you see it. And that's for everyone different. And we are in Europe, and I think that for a Nordic person, that's different from a South person. Humor is different. And so there's no one single recipe for good films that travel, I guess.
Yeah.
And just to add, I think there is a question about self-censorship. If you try to reproduce what you have done before, technically you try to censor what can be different. I have an example of a film we worked with some years ago, which was called Divines. Technically, we had to talk with many distributors. We were telling us we think the cinema owners will not like this film because it's a film with girls, it's a film with Arabic origin and so on. So that's precisely not what the audience wants to see. And at the other side, we have a platform, in this case, who was telling, my God, it's amazing. It's a film with action. It's a mafia film with girls, with different origins. So that's precisely what is nice. So that's where data and disruption have to connect, because we could probably have a similar story with cinemas if they could access or at least try to reach this audience the same way.
Well, actually, William, we're not going to maybe launch a debate on the algorithm dictatorship, but still, there are potential also ways to use data to not narrow ourselves when it comes to diversity, but broader it, actually, and discover, the little sparkles that are going to make the divine, the intouchable type of success stories?
Wow. Gosh, that's a good question. I guess I guess you can do that. I mean, you could build. I've never been asked that, so I'm just gonna.
Okay, let's brainstorm together.
No. I guess what you could do is you could build that into the algorithm. You could kind of throw in the spice, so to speak, and so build out an algorithm which says this is the kind of patterns of films that you like and what interests you, but then. You can throw a little bit of spontaneity in there into the algorithm. But what's really interesting, actually, is they've done a lot of studies have shown that content, and I hate to put content into buckets, but it can be put into buckets of different types of content where there's similarities between the content. And what's interesting about what John and Christophe just said is some content can bridge these buckets.
Yeah.
And what that does is if people can, so for example, we have a strong LGBT presence on our platform. What's interesting is that people might be consuming a lot of gay content, for example, but there might be certain films that bridge them into other buckets of content where they then start to consume that content. It's a way of introducing them and making them feel comfortable to try something new. So I think, to try and answer your question, I'd say identify those buckets, identify the kind of topics that Jean-Christophe just mentioned.
Absolutely.
And put a little bit of spice into the algorithm. And
before we do open the question to the floor, and again, if you have a question, if you have a reaction, just please raise your hand and we'll provide you a mic so that we can hear you loud and clear. Just a quick question about the promotion side and part of the distribution value chain. First, should promotional activity be more vigorously supported in media? Because, I mean, as the commissioner puts it, we're probably going to end up having such a great increase in the budget that it would be a shame not to use it. But actually, yeah, how can we actually better partner on this side of promotion so that we can better distribute movies? What would be your dream when it comes to this, Jeanne?
Well, I think it could be best promoted. I think that with the new AVMS directive now, which obliges the platforms to have 30% of European content, we will need to have new means of promotions, because it's not only having 30% in the catalog. We don't care of having 30% in the catalog if nobody wants to see it. You need to have a curator, you need to have advertising, you need to have people saying, I loved it, you have to go to that platform and see it. It's a great French movie, Italian movie. So I think we will need more financial means for that. So you can always do more in promotion, but I think and going back to what we were saying before, you need to know who you're talking to, because you're addressing a community or several communities. And it's really something now that the film funds are really interested in, and asking, who are you aiming the film to? Who are you doing this film for? If it's 200 people, if it's very clear and very identified, it's not a problem. It's going to be a niche, it's no problem. But you need to stop saying, I'm doing this film for Cannes, Berlin, and Venice, people from 7 to 75 years old, because sometimes it happens, but I think it's once every 100 years. So you need to know who you're talking to, and then you can adapt your promotion to who you're talking to.
So going back to the basics and actually trying to define the right target for the right content.
Yeah, and especially I think it's a big difference today also, if you know where your audience is. The younger audience is used to work with the new technologies, but there is still a large audience that is not used to the internet, and you need to reach them as well. They are not all on Facebook and on Twitter and on, but they can not buy any DVDs anymore, and they want to watch movies. And those people have a lot of time, and we don't reach them. So it's a new way of reaching that kind of, let's say, 70 plus people who have a lot of time and who are looking at content, good content, and therefore something like, there's nothing on TV. But then, you need to reach, how will we reach those ones? That's, I think, there where we need also a lot of promotion. And thinking out of the box.
There's definitely a question when it comes to lost audiences, right, Jean-Christophe?
I think there is another topic which is maybe different, which is the fact that we need more European stars. It's something which is very important.
In terms of talent?
It's not in question of talent. It's in terms of branding.
Okay.
It's true that we somehow it's a big work. It's like we can start it now and continue this talk in 10 years, but technically we need 55 Catherine Deneuve and not all with this age anymore. We need to identify. So it's great to see that you have Léa Seydoux and different people who are making film, but we need more of this talent coming from the different countries. Because one of the power of Hollywood is the fact that we know faces, we want to see a film with this actor or this actress, and we don't have this power as well because as a continent we have different languages and so on, but that's why this international co-production, we have to create these brands because we have the actors. It's not an actor issue; it's a branding issue. So I think that's one of the directions which is very important as well.
William, any perspective on this promotion side of the question?
I think everyone's said really good points on this. I just want to go back to what Jeanne actually mentioned, which I think is really important. Unfortunately, not only do filmmakers need to be great filmmakers, at the very start of the project, when they're working with funders, they need to say, Jen's absolutely right, they need to say, who is the audience? Who are we marketing? What groups are we marketing to? What ages are they? What are their interests? Where are they? Where can we connect with them? How can we connect with that community that's going to find this type of film interesting or this topic relevant? Right at the very start of the film process, before it's even made. And then as it goes through development, as it gets made, as it gets produced and distributed, then that feeds into the promotions, and you can build that in. So I would say it's something that needs to be thought of right at the start. When the script's written, who are we marketing to? Who's our audience? And then work with the funders to identify that audience and to start fostering interest and passion for that project, so that throughout the life cycle, in the theatre, on VOD, in the community, it's seen and it's heard because it's got its community identified. It's nothing worse than making a film that no one wants to see because you don't know who you're marketing it to.
Absolutely. So I hope we're actually fostered your interest for questions, because the floor is now open to your reaction and questions. So if you do have one, just raise your hand and we'll provide you a mic. We have one question, second row.
Thank you. I'm Ilona Morrison from Cinephile in the UK. I've got two questions ready because we talked about VOD platforms and platforms of platforms and so on. I am, committed to theatrical releases. Obviously, we do VOD as well because we have to. But at the end of the day, isn't it the case that we would like to see a film that we buy fill the theaters? So how can, amazing success on platforms can actually help putting the bums on seats, as you say in the UK? Thanks.
First and foremost, there is sometimes a misconception that VOD platforms are competitors to theatres. That is not the case.
Okay.
I cannot stress that enough. I would rather people saw films in the cinema, but the reality and the depressing reality is there's just not enough screens for the content that's being released. Yeah. So an effective distribution strategy, which I think Curzon do very well in the UK, it's another Eurovod member, is to have a day-and-date release where the film will be released in some cinemas in some cities, but crucially, the marketing campaign for the cinema theatrical release and for the online release can take place at the same time, which means you then have more money to throw into raising awareness of that film, because the reality is, especially in the UK, we do not have enough films, enough screens to show foreign language films. We don't. It's a depressing reality of our culture, right? Yes. So the key here is, what that does is it enables us for it to be seen in the theatre where it should be seen, but where it's not available, people can see it online. And that is the power of VOD. So I must stress, we are not a competitor for the theatre, far from it.
No, I of course not. But
no.
We've never dared do day and date because we thought we're going to lose all our sitting customers, as it were. Yeah. But it makes sense what you say. Totally. Maybe we'll do that for the next release.
Let's chat afterwards.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Do we have another question, another reaction, maybe? Some example you want to share when it comes to distributing your films and that we want one of our guests to have a reaction on? Oh, yeah, sure, please, do so. We have another question with the very same attendee.
Thank you. The other question was about the data, because obviously there's the privacy issues. I mean, we are all having to fill in, data protection questionnaires, to go back to all the people on our mailing list and so on. And also, I think it was Annemie who said that you ask like an indirect question to your customers, and by that you're going to imagine what they like. I feel slightly uneasy about it, but I know, because I also run a festival, that I have to get a profile from my audience, but I daren't ask the questions I need to ask, so I don't know how to do it. And no, privacy and the sort of intrusiveness of the questions.
Yeah, well, of course, they are open to answer or not. They are not obliged to. Yeah. So that's why we did it in a form of something funny. Who like you can share it on Facebook. Then everyone can see that you are Sofia Gabriel or something fun. But of course, if you don't want to reply, then you don't reply. And we have the privacy entirely, blah, 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 that they say, okay, it's good, you can have all the data, you can play with the data, and I want to have some information from you, that's okay.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And at this point, of course, I think, William, it's important that we're tackling the GDPR question, because guess what? GDPR is upcoming, and while talking about this potential data economy, that will be a great opportunity for filmmakers and for the distribution side of it, we still have to tackle privacy.
Oh boy, yeah.
No,
GDPR is currently the bane of my existence, because we got about 100,000 people on our database, and it's going to be fun when I get back from Cannes. I think you're absolutely right. How we protect privacy and how we communicate with our audience is obviously going to become increasingly important and regulated, and as it justifiably should be. So we all have to think about how we deal with these issues and put forward systems and processes in place so that we don't have issues.
Because actually, is by heart, of course, but as users and content consumers, we're not going to embrace a technology or platform, whatever it is, unless we do trust it.
Absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, what happened with Cambridge Analytica is a great example, but I'm sure that there's plenty more that have been getting away with this for a long time, and they've just not been caught.
So, to come back to our discussion, definitely trust is also one of the ingredients. I mean, to actually engage a more wider dialogue and discussion with your audiences. And how do you make sure that you gained their trust and you're not losing it?
Yeah, good question again. First and foremost, I'm going to turn that on its head. We occasionally get technical problems. So what we always try to do is when someone emails with a technical problem, I or my co-founder or someone on my behalf immediately responds. And what that does is it tells the user that we care about their problem and that we're trying to solve it and that we will resolve it within 24 hours. So it's being responsive, it's having an open and honest conversation, it's having privacy policy that is very clearly and tells your audience exactly what you're going to do, and ultimately gives them the choice to opt in or opt out if they need to. But I think we're all, frankly, probably struggling to get ready for GDPR, because for some of us, for example, my business, it's going to have a big impact. So we all need to deal with these issues and start to address them.
It's next week, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it.
Jean, Christophe, and Annemie, I thought you wanted to jump in.
Well, the trust is indeed, I agree that technically, we all have to compete with Netflix that is working like bam. And then we have to compete with that, and we need to be at the same level, of course. But it's also, you can compare it with the old-fashioned way, where we had also customers that trust you in a way that, if our audience, we hear it often, oh, it's a film from Lumière, then it will be good. And that is something that you need to build up with the new technology as well. It's just that trust that you need to gain. It's not because it's online that it's different.
Wow, it's a wonderful jingle, I guess, for the very last answer with Jean-Christophe.
No, and I think this question of trust is very important because there is in the value chain, the obvious trust part, in my opinion, is the cinema owner. You know that the cinema around the corner, I see one of the best cinema owner in front of me yelling when I say this. It's true that you're trusting the cinema around the corner. Somehow you know they have good films, and somehow they have this real connection that sometimes they can curate in a way that probably nobody else in the chain can do. Distributors are on another side trying to create marketing, deal about topics. You might have trust about what the distributor is doing as well. You have some brand, which is very important. But I think the things that we should retain for social medias and so on, it's the concept of recommendation.
Absolutely.
Because that's what is missing a bit in the two sides of the industry. There is a distributor in the US which is called Criterion, which is doing DVD editions of old films. They started something very simple. You have list, I don't know if it's every month or every week or something, you have one famous person who tells what are the 10 favorite movies of the Criterion catalog. And the thing is, well, I have names coming, but I'm not sure they are in this list. But if you have Neil Young or the singer of the Beastie Boys or Rihanna telling you that the 10 films I love, it's true that it's a way for some of the people loving that to connect. And this kind of recommendation, it's true that if, as professional, we tell you it's a good film, you should see it, maybe you will not be convinced. If the cinema tells that, maybe it's true. If it's your friend or your neighbor, you will go. So that's precisely where we should try to have more impact and try to actually to push this part of recommendation for European films and what we do.
Jeanne.
Yeah, I completely agree. We have set up this operation in Belgium where we show our Belgian films that have not been released yet. Like 2 months before the release, we show the film to trendsetters. There are cooks, there are CEOs, there are singers, there are designers, and we show them the film, and we're like 100 of them, and the crew is there, the actors, the director, and then we talk about the film, and we eat together and everything. And after that, we say, just like 2 weeks before the theatrical release, we say, now, guys, you go and you promote. And they all go on Twitter and Facebook, and it's because it's them. If we were doing it ourselves, it wouldn't work, but it's because it's the designer you like, or the singer, or the YouTuber that you like that says, I've seen this film, you have to see it, that it's happening. So I think we have to go for very precise promotion actions like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about influence and recommendation online, which is super smart to activate this way. Am I frustrating anyone if I'm calling this discussion off? Or do you still have one question or reaction to share with us? I guess we have a question or reaction. Just wait a quick second. You're gonna have a mic so we can hear you.
Hello, everyone. I just wondered whether we could have a show of hands as to how many people would watch foreign films if they could in the English language or Spanish or whatever.
So who would?
Rest my case. Okay.
Okay.
I rest my case.
Proof of concept.
Yeah, I think you've just proved your point. But I just want to add to Jen's point about influencers. I think that's something that I think we didn't actually mention until the end, and I think Jen's absolutely spot on. We need to. Unfortunately, the youth today, if watching films in subtitles is going to be sexy, their favorite designer or their favorite pop star needs to make it sexy.
One very final question with you, sir.
Okay, so I wanted to ask what is the opinion from the distributor side, because we are talking about cinemas and influencers and everything, but we opened the EFF in Berlin with this statement of this gentleman who said how we expect that the future audience is buying an art house cinema ticket when we fill them up with a fast media from the very early ages. So is there a chance that the distribution level or the VOD somehow like partnering or do a two-way communication into the education field, that they help somehow to shape and educate the young audience, not only reach them and get them over the influencers, otherwise like that they're that the benefit or the revenues from the distribution world can support the education world, that the kids learn, like reading Shakespeare, that they learn to read films on the early level, on the age.
So building new audiences through education and cultural diversity, I guess. William.
That's such a great point that you raised there. And to be very frank, it's something that we do appallingly badly in the UK. We should be going into schools from a young age, getting them comfortable, watching, enjoying, participating, engaging, and having fun in watching foreign language films. Because if you can get children from a young age who are to get used to watching amazing French cinema, amazing Italian cinema, then they're going to continue to watch that as they grow older. And if you also then coordinate that with the language learning component, then you're going to help to bridge culture, bridge languages, and really, you know, what is it the Jesuits said? There was an expression about the Jesuits. You give me a child from the age of 5 and I will have them as a Catholic for life. And you know, that was 500 years ago, but the concept is the same. If you can get children from a young age to enjoy these types of foreign language films and art house films, then they're going to keep watching them as they get older. But the key there is making it fun. Yeah, you've got to make it an enjoyable experience. And I think the Trolls film could be a good way to do that.
Coming back to the Trolls and love stories.
It's a film for older people, but I mean, oh no, when I say older, it's like I'm not below 14 or something.
Oh, with the right target, or looking about data marketing?
No, actually, it's technically in terms of target, it's a film which aims for people from 20 till 45, I think. So
I feel so 20 now.
Yeah, no, but in this precise case, it's a genre film, so it's something very special. But I think the point about education to the images is something very important, because it's a place where it's very different in the different European countries. You have some places like in France or in Belgium as well, to a certain extent, where it works well or better than in other countries. Let's say it can always be better. And some countries where it doesn't exist at all. So.
No, I think that we are Belgium is maybe complicated in that case, because we have the French-speaking part, the Flemish-speaking part. The Flemish-speaking part is not dubbing at all. So we are used, as soon as children can read subtitles, they do read subtitles, and we do not dub anymore. So it's the same as in Scandinavian countries. All the young people from 8 years onwards, everyone is watching cinema in other languages. So in a way, it's natural. But then, of course, they need to see other films than American films. And I must say that in the Flemish-speaking part of Belgium, and as well in the French-speaking part, we have associations that are really well working with education, with programs that are presented to the different schools. Schools can order some movies, they go with the children to the movies, and there is an entire educational file that goes with the film and with whom the teachers can work with. And that works really, really very well.
Yeah, I think there are many countries where you can have those programs. What is really strange in French-speaking Belgium is that we've realized that we show kids more European films than Belgian films. So they don't know about our own cinematography. So now we're launching a VOD platform for schools for showing them Belgian films, because they're used to seeing European films, American films, but not our own. So we have to do it the other way around. But I think, yeah, as you said, I mean, there are so many good associations working with the kids with that. What they really need is financing. And they need to be working with the schools, because sometimes they have very good tools, they have everything they need, but the teachers don't have time for letting their kids see a film, and they have to cut it into 3 or 4 pieces, and so it's not the same experience.
Thank you very much for your answers and perspective. Thank you very much for your question and reaction. I guess that's all we have time for, but you can get some applause, I guess. And I do release you from duty on this stage. No. So that we can actually greet our next panel. And we're, in the few seconds, going to tackle networking for more audiences this time. To do so, I'll definitely need the help of Madeleine Probst for Europa Cinemas, Bobby Allen for MUBI, Stefano Massenzi for Looky Red, and Daniela Elstner for Doc and Film. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm waiting for you on stage.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I guess. Très bien, et vous? Yeah. Hi.
And you can see that we are about to talk about the way we can team up, but we already have a team on stage. Everyone knows each other around this table. And actually, the idea here for the next few minutes is to try to see how we can network to foster more audiences, of course, but we can think about creating a network of theaters. Some have done this process around the table. A network of distributors, for instance, a network of VOD platforms, or a network of festivals. In a word, how can we actually benefit from this networking effect to reach wider audiences wherever they meet European works? And we'll actually deep dive into very specific examples to try to learn the secret recipe out of it. Actually, Madeleine, I'd like with you to tackle first the theater community and the way European cinemas have been such a great success over the past few years. So just to remain some fact and figure here, you were created in 1992. Now you're actually gathering more than 208,000 screens in 43 different countries, which actually means 78 million tickets sold over the years, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm here on behalf of Europa Cinemas. I'm the vice president, but I also run a cinema based in Bristol called Watershed, which also does a lot of other things than cinema and works with VR and different technologies. So we're quite an unusual example within the network. But in terms of the achievements of Europa Cinemas, I think there's a kind of twofold side to the network that have been really effective. One is a quite straightforward incentive, which has been in place since the outset, to incentivize cinemas to screen more European films and more non-national European films, to really incentivize the circulation of films across countries. And that means across the network, the average is 1 in 6 screenings are actually dedicated. It is dedicated to 6 out of 10 screenings are dedicated to European film. And then you might ask, well, what's the impact on audiences?
What was the impact on audiences?
Because that's the thing, it's quite hard to convince public funders to invest in such an incentive without actually having the results. Well, the results are really good, because if you look at global figures, we're hitting twice, we're reaching twice more audiences for European films within the network. So when you look at the slate of films from Cannes last year, we looked at a sample of films, but films like The Square take 60% of their admissions within the Europa Cinemas network. And then if you start drilling down into some individual countries, maybe in Romania, it took 100% of its admissions in the Europa Cinemas network. So I would say it's a very good investment, return on investment. So when we talk about, going back to your point about how do you solve this problem of screens, invest in more cinemas, potentially. That's one way of looking at it, because we often sort of jump to VOD as a solution to better access. I think the other thing that we've touched on in the last panel is we're not just about access. We are about making films visible, and we're about building communities around films. We don't just build audiences, but we build communities. These communities can then be activated for all sorts of things. So whether it's social cohesion, whether it's bums on seats, whether it's VOD results after we've created that visibility for the films. Another thing I want to point out is we also offer support for cinemas to do things with young people, and that is working with influencers, exposing children to films from an early age, working with schools, working on a whole range of activities. 80% of our cinemas, so of the over 1,000 cinemas we work with, do young people's activities. So they're super active in this area, but we do it on a shoestring budget. I think I'll leave it at that.
Well, actually, from your perspective, again, and experience over the past few years at Europa cinemas, what has been the key element that actually has brought together this community? Because what we're definitely trying to talk about around this panel is, of course, building networks, but also building communities so that you can, as you just put it, engage with them.
So I think the first part is having a sort of reason for coming together around something, which is why I started by talking about the incentive. There's a sort of reason for us to come together. The second part is we have done a phenomenal amount of work in building the cinema community and creating really dynamic forums for sharing best practice. And we do that on a lot of different levels. So a lot of you may have heard about the conference we do every 2 years, which attracts 500 people, involves often sales agents that have a parallel meeting. There's a lot of interaction with distribution as well, and guests like MUBI as well come and get involved. That's the kind of flagship thing. But the thing that fuels the content of the conference is what I call a kind of year-round incubator of best practice through a series of labs in Sevilla, in Sofia, in Bologna, that drill really deep into specific topics and gather smaller groupings of exhibitors and external guests where we really go into the subject and start getting granular with it. And I think that's the only way we can really start finding decent solutions. And then we try to sort of multiply the learning that happens in these very focused sessions by sharing case studies. We've just, thanks to the European Commission, we had a bit of an uplift to redesign the website for the first time in a very long time, and that will make a difference to that community, also connecting online. But, we are stretched and we could do a lot more. The other phenomenon that I'm noticing is out of the labs, we're starting to get requests from individual countries for us to go and make more specific interventions within existing national conferences or forums, and that's proving really effective as well. So we've done one in Romania, we've done one in Sarajevo, where we can go in and maybe have a slightly more focused intervention where there's a very specific situation you're dealing with.
So I guess it's also being more of a sparring partner of the theater community so that you can actually help them warm their way to the challenges they have to meet.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
It's also about being a sparring partner of the theater community so that you can actually warm their way onto the challenges that they have to meet nowadays?
Well, I think the thing to remember with Europa Cinemas is it is by theatres. Like the people that run the place, Claude Eric owns a cinema and has a festival, and the people on the boards are people like Christian Breuer, who runs York Kino in Berlin, and me, and Lina Pecce from Keynote. So we are at the heart of the organization. We are doing this. So, and there's been a lot of a big effort as well to try to survey the membership, the wider membership, to understand what their concerns are. So we did one on investment, how cinemas fund themselves, but also how much they generate in terms of income for a community. And the next one will be on data, because we realize the data thing is not going to be probably one uniform solution. I think that's the thing we always seduced by this as a sector. But we're realizing actually it will be more granular and about equipping the cinemas to make more of the data that they've got access to. Like Jean-Christophe said, there is more and more that we are capturing from our audiences, but what you do with it and how you sort of really create a return on investment for all the chain is another matter.
So from your perspective again, what would be one key ingredient that you could add to the Europa Cinemas network recipe to make it more effective?
Oh my God, where do you start? I think more, at the moment we're in a position where people want to join the network, but the money's not getting bigger. We know that particularly in Eastern Europe, we have less of a presence. And sometimes even through investing in a caravan program, you can then start re-energizing a whole bunch of cinemas. There's an example in this booklet, which you can download from the website, of Kino Mediterraneo in Croatia, which has, through a kind of caravan program, has re-energized a whole bunch of cinemas that are now reopening, and they're getting extremely good results. So I think also looking at capital investment and technology upgrades. We had the VPF thing before, now it's gone. Even from running quite a very successful cinema in Bristol, it's a concern how we're going to keep ourselves looking good, but also being accessible spaces, being attractive spaces. We're the shop front. We're talking to audiences all the time. We're the first impression they might have of film and this film culture. And also, I think with new forms evolving, like VR and different forms, it's also, if you want us to make these new forms work and reach an audience, we need to change our spaces. We run a couple of VR festivals in Bristol, and you do need to put quite a lot in place to make sure there's a good experience, and you start developing the model for the transaction with the audience.
Before we do move on our next focus to MUBI, Daniela and Stefano, what can we learn from this Europa Cinemas example? What should we take away?
I think MUBI do a fantastic job.
We're going to talk about MUBI in a few seconds, but Lynn, please stop.
We work with them.
Wait a quick second, please. We're about to deep dive into MUBI in 1 second, but I would like first to have the reaction of Daniela and Stefano on the European cinemas example.
So the first thing that I think should be said is that of course, one cannot agree, but that the theatrical release of a film is the key to the visibility and to the circulation of a movie. So that's the first thing that maybe needs to be said. In a world where we have too many movies. So
too many movies, not enough screens.
Too many movies, not enough screens, but even a VOD, and probably Bobby can confirm, has a visibility space. And if you look at all the studies, even the big platforms will tell you that there's a shelf life, then it goes into the back shelf, it's there, but nobody sees it. So too many movies. So we have also to realize, because when I read the data on circulation, we learn that a certain number of European films circulate. We have to be happy of how many instead of how little. Why? Because many cannot circulate because they're local. Many cannot circulate because they're not good. And the good ones do circulate. We have to strengthen these because, of course, Europa Cinema, which is a terrific and fantastic, and as also theater exhibitors, also as well as distributors. All our theaters are Europa Cinema theaters. So we know very well that that is, the first window to create value on that particular content. Then, of course, the audiovisual production world is made of many products that are tailored to each and single segment of the big audiovisual world. Not all films can access or should access the theaters because we create a pressure towards the theaters. And, you know, it's a weekly fight. You know, we have a very conflictual relationship with the theaters as we have with the television. Everybody is in conflict with everybody. So when you talk about networking, there's a wonderful recent example that I can share coming from Italy. Now, Sky, being the major pay TV operator in Italy, for many years has taught us that, has sold us the fact that exclusivity, okay, and windowing were the key to the exploitation of films. Now they have become distributors themselves and also producers.
And they change their minds?
Basically, their films go to more than one platform in pay TV, and guess what? Not after 12 months like every other distributor, but after 4. So, you know, there's no rule, and there's need of flexibility because, again, I want to see what happens when a film will go day and date in theaters and on Netflix. Now, how many subscribers has Netflix in Italy? I don't know.
They won't release the data.
Let's say 1 million. There's 25, 30 million families. So 29 million families do not have Netflix. So my guess would be that with the big push and promotion that Netflix puts behind their Netflix original, maybe we can, you know, we can chance it. But again, what will be the reaction of the theaters? What do you think?
Well, let's ask the exhibitor in a few seconds. But you know, actually, it's always this fierce debate about the chronology in every single member of state. But also, what I'm learning from your takeaway is like we should push for more networking, but avoiding cannibalization between screens. Right?
Absolutely, that's totally key. I mean, it takes common sense. I mean, and of course, not everybody has common sense. But again, it takes common sense to exploit the movie in the best possible way. To be too rigid, it doesn't work, because a film that is not in the theaters after 2 weeks, it happens every day, shouldn't wait for I don't know how many months to be on MUBI. At the same time, we also need to make the audience understand the preciousness of a theatrical movie. And this is the risk of where we're going to, because of course there's local legislation, there is a complexity of interest towards production, towards local production, etc., that could endanger the value of the films we produce, we distribute, we exhibit, and we exploit. And that has to be taken in great care. So, of course, the French model maybe is too rigid, but is very careful in protecting what they're making.
Good point, though. Daniela, your takeaway from the Europa Cinemas example, and then we'll switch to the MUBI example.
Yeah, maybe just 2 small things. When we started a few years ago as sales agents in Europe to think where we could do a conference, we were very quickly thinking of partnering somehow with Europa Cinema. Not because we don't like our distributors, who are our direct clients, but because it seems something that we actually don't know. Nevertheless, they are the ones who bring the films into the theaters. And it's something we always go through a distributor, but it was something like, well, actually, who are they? And the first year, it was really, I think, for us, very informative, because when I first listened to Madeleine and explaining me that her cinema, she wants it like to be the upper store of the city, I don't know how many times I quoted you in my different meetings with distributors, also like, oh yeah, but you have to go to this cinema, etc. So I think there was a lot of learning process for us. And from there, we started a real relationship of networking. And maybe I go into that later. We even went together with Europa Cinema to the art house exhibitors in the US, and now are exploring new schemes there, thanks also to Creative Europe. But I think it's really something for us where I think networking is networking with our first clients, like the distributors, but then on all levels, like exhibitors, MUBI, etc. And I think it's such a learning process. And as our business models are shifting for all of us all the time, the more we learn together, the more easy it is to exploit also things that we actually learn and we can put into practice.
Absolutely. So now, what about MUBI, actually? Just a quick fact and figure. Of course, you're the online cinematheque. You've been doing so since you've been created in 2007, actually. But how do you actually are winning from this double type of approach of getting distribution in cinemas and on VOD? Yeah. How can you actually, it's like you have two different legs, but you're still walking.
Yeah, well, and this is our great example of networking. So MUBI is an online VOD platform. We're curated, but primarily we're also cinephiles, and we love great cinema. So our brand is about supporting festival films and really getting behind great cinema. Well, if you love great cinema, you can't actually say that an iPhone is the best place to watch a film. You'd always really choose to go and see it in the cinema. It's great that you can watch a film on an iPhone because it makes cinema more accessible. But it really made sense to us that we needed to really be involved in supporting the theatrical experience. And I totally agree with Stefano that the theatrical still builds a lot of value for the films. And he's absolutely right as well about shelf space, even within an environment like Netflix, where if you're just not on the homepage, you can disappear very, very quickly. So I think the cinema is very important. It's important for our brand as well. So we launched our own theatrical distribution company, and that's been going very well. We're able then to give the films a chance in the cinema, but then also have the best possible digital distribution strategy for each film. But even beyond that, I wanted to say in terms of networking that when we started, basically VOD was always seen as the enemy of exhibitors. And there was a lot of worry about cannibalization. And I guess there's probably some exhibitors who still have that attitude. But we have a great example of actually a Europa Cinemas member, which is the Glasgow Film Theatre, who came to us about a year ago and said, look, guys, we love what you do. We share your values, and we gave them love back, and because we love what they do and the kind of films they program. And they said, look, we tried to launch our own VOD platform, and it really didn't work. It didn't take off, and there's a lot of stories like that out there. People at some point thought, oh, VOD, it's great. You hire someone to build you a website and you put some films there. Well, it's much more complicated than that, of course. So they said, look, why don't you, actually they started by saying, would you maybe white label MUBI for us, i.e., create a Glasgow Film Theatre experience? And we're like, well, that doesn't really work for us. That's not our business model. Why don't we do this? Why don't we work out some sort of partnership? And they said, great. We have a membership program, and we would love it if our members were able to have MUBI for a year for free. Or somehow we came to that number. I don't know exactly the steps. I don't remember. But more or less, we had this conversation. Said, wouldn't it be great if every Glasgow Film Theatre member could buy their yearly membership and also be able to access the films on MUBI? So that completely sort of solves their issue of being able to have an online presence. So we created this partnership. And in exchange for that, they basically agreed to contextualize MUBI in their cinema. So in their cinema, when people come, there is twice a month a trailer of a reel of the upcoming films on MUBI, and also a message for customers to get a Glasgow Film Theatre membership so they can also access these films online. And that has been incredibly successful. And they were super happy. Like, I think their projection, and I don't know if Alison's here, but anyways, I believe that they beat their yearly target within the first quarter this year for selling memberships. And for us, it's brilliant because we get amazing contextualized sort of advertising and brand awareness in the cinema. And I think that's just such a great example of like how both VOD and cinemas can really work together to help each other now.
Well, it's definitely a perfect example of what smart partnerships can be. But just remind us the number of users right now on MUBI.
MUBI, we have users. We have about 8 million users globally. Yeah.
And in the previous panel, we're of course tackling data and the way we can use in a smarter way also data to benefit from it, to engage more with audiences, to target the right audiences for the right content at the right moment on the right screen. Actually, how impactful has it been to your audiences, specifically, this type of double strategy?
Well, I think it's been really great. I think it works both ways because on one hand, when it comes to the P&A spend, we can be incredibly efficient with P&A because we actually already have these people who want to see these films coming to us every day. So we're already in a daily dialogue with the people who want to see the new Lars von Trier film or Zizhenke film. So if we're then able to acquire that film and release it theatrically, when we go to actually spend the P&A and advertising money, we already have this conversation with them and that relationship. So yeah, it works really well. And then for the films themselves, I think, I would say that our attitude towards distribution is very flexible. So really what we're trying to do is just maximize the viewership of the film, really, and find the best way to reach the widest possible audience. So that would sometimes mean adhering to a full theatrical holdback. In certain cinemas, you have to wait 6 months before you can show the film online. In other instances, it may not make sense to do that. So it could literally be, 2 weeks or a week in the cinema and then online distribution, and often online distribution concurrent with theatrical. So there's a lot of situations, because I should explain as well that we're theatrical distributors in the US and the UK. Well, in the US, for sort of smaller festival films, it often takes a while for the film to make its way around such a vast country. And we often make a decision, say, well, maybe after 10 markets, we'll show the film online. But then we still get calls from cities all over the country saying, we'd really like to show that film and book it, even though it's already available online. So there's this opportunity as well.
Still tackling the audience part of it, audience/users. At the very beginning of MUBI, we could have thought about MUBI as a niche audience type of platform. Is it still the case, or do you now think that you've reached such an increased number in your users that you're way beyond that?
No, I think it still is a niche, and we're very happy with that. We're sort of, have a saying, we're sort of like 85% of the people who love cinema don't care what we do. And what I mean by that is it's the people who go to Marvel and all the rest of it. But it's that 10-15% of people, which on a global basis is actually quite a vast audience, that we really want to reach. And even more than that, we want to grow that number. So we want to turn that 15% into 20, 30, 40% over time. Because I think what happens is, and particularly in the age of algorithms, I mean, we're very much programmed by humans. We sort of differentiate ourselves as not being algorithmic. But a lot of programming is done algorithmically now. And what happens with those algorithms is they see that you watch, they put on the homepage, or they present to you a documentary, and you might not even be a documentary fan, but you watch that documentary, and if you like it, of course, they serve you another one right away. So it's that YouTube thing and Netflix thing of like the film starts right away. And what they find is people will click and almost like subconsciously or like a sheep or whatever, they will start watching more documentaries. And okay, you can say that's a bit creepy and weird, but at the end of the day, they do end up developing whole verticals for new types of content. So I think we do it differently, but I do think there is, the digital sphere does give you opportunity to not just preserve audiences for certain types of films, but expand them.
That like the Black Mirror type of side of recommendation algorithms, right? So again, what can we take away from this very example? I guess we were talking with you, Stefano, about the differentiation between partnering, networking, and cannibalizing each other's. Is it still the perfect example for your proof of concept of trying not to mix up the screens where we can engage with audiences?
Yes, I think that, it's in what we do, but since the beginning, there was something said that is very important at the right beginning. Films should be made thinking for who they are. And I think that, probably, I'm going to say something terrible, and I'm going to regret it, probably 80% of the films are not made thinking for who they are. So producers probably should speak much more with with sales agents who turn down probably, I don't know, thousands of films. We turn down the other 990, and then just, you know, just the true selection gets to the theaters that throw out another good part of it.
And then miracle happens.
And then when they get to MUBI will tell you that most of these films, if they've been successful theatrically, they have a shot, or otherwise they'll do very thin numbers. So it's all about, of course, we're all in business and we're also conflicting, but at the same time we need to cooperate. And for example, the best practices as networking with sales agents are the companies that manage to share as much information as possible with their distributors, not only from what is the film is doing in the various territories, because it's quite rare in our environment of independent European, non-national, not foreign language. I hate the idea of foreign language. Different language. That is another thing that I really like.
Multi-language. Multi-language content.
Multi-language, different language. World, they are released in different periods, and so understanding what has happened in other territories, for the good and for the bad, is really key. Relationship with the theaters. It's a day-to-day work to furnish the theater as much as possible information and get information from them on what works, what doesn't work, how does it work, etc., etc., etc. And then again, using the chronology in the best possible way. You have limitations like in France. You don't have limitations like in Italy and many other countries, but you need to use the chronology in the best possible way for the good of the film. Because of course, you know, our aim is to make as much business as possible and get as many viewers as possible.
But this type of examples, again, might definitely impact your distribution strategies, right? So how do you worm your way or move around the lines between regulation, between the chronology, and between the need to, again, reach audiences where they are?
It's part of a daily work, you know. It's chronology is less of a problem because we only have a contractual commitment on the bigger theater chains that don't want you to go online before a certain amount of time. So it's more coordinating not only with theaters, but for example, even with other distributors. It's not easy. It's very, very difficult. Very difficult. Because of course, you know, you have in the same day 10 films, many times hitting the same target. And this makes it very difficult for everybody, for us, but also for the theaters, because they're in a situation where they don't have enough seats, enough screens, enough time to show the movies. And so you have this craziness of the multi-programming, and so you have a film showing one time, another, and so all sorts of fights start off. But again, what is very important, and also another thing I wanted to mention is what is very important in terms of the European funding and help and aid. You know, Europa Cinema is probably the best practice example that you can see, because you can see it there.
Very tangible.
Absolutely. The support that has been done and given in all these years to distribution also is very important, because many of these films you have to consider, they cost money to be made and to be bought, but at the same time, when you go down the line, they don't have the same potential of sales in terms of television, for example.
It's called weighing the pros and cons while investing in a film, I guess.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it helps reducing the risk. And so even more, well, you were asking the question, do you need more funding, maybe production? Production has a lot, locally especially. So you would need to help more co-production. And this, I think, is the last question, because co-production, of course, that is very needed. Distribution, more films should be supported. Absolutely, because I don't think enough films are supported.
Let's follow up, actually, on this very point with you, Daniela.
Yeah, I just have one very concrete thing. I usually don't get so much inspired by the Americans, but I must say, like, if I look at the big majors, how they handle distribution throughout the world, it's all coming, of course, from one point going out. I think the networking in Europe, and that's what you said, I think we have to shape also our way of distributing films together. So that's where when I get an information from a theater, I can, as a sales agent, use it in my way of thinking how I can structure the sales of the film. And then what I think is very important, because I have a couple of very challenging films, but I feel that even the very challenging films, if we put enough energy and work and sharing of information together, we can still work around the challenges and difficulties and get the films out, but we have to be together. And for me, it's really, I mean, I just had an example here in Cannes. I'm a very big fan of early breakfast meetings with distributors who hate me for that because they're early. But then we gathered.
Very early.
Well, we started at 8:15, like around, so, well, it's quite early. And we gathered, I gathered all distributors from a film that I sold in Berlin, it was called Golden Beer, and we had a breakfast meeting, and we were talking about the challenges of the film, which is not easy, about how to target the press, how can we address this, how can we maybe reverse, and we talked about it on a European level, and we had some examples from Romania, from France, from Germany, etc. And I think this made it just I don't know, you can sense it, that suddenly something happens within this breakfast where people just say, okay, I can learn actually from my partner here in the next territory, next to my territory. I can take something back and I can work around it. And if I have a problem 1 month later, I can still, maybe I can also share this information later and say, oh, this didn't work at all, so maybe you should change. So, and I think this kind of networking can be very small, but is the more important, the more we are in so challenging times, and we have somehow to survive against all these big machines. But we can strangely do it even with very, very independently. That for me, it's not a problem to be like on an independent cinema, but it's on the contrary. We can use it, but we have somehow to use it in a more like efficient way and on a bigger scale.
Which actually brings us to one of the propositions of Commissioner Gabriel when it comes to the repertory, le répertoire, where you would all along the value chain be able to share data about the content you're actually producing, distributing, using, putting online, and which would be, from your perspective, a smart way to actually share the information so that you can actually use it from your own perspective?
Yes, of course. I mean, that's for me the basis. What we try to do, actually, I consider it's part of my job to collect data as much as I can.
You're a platform
certainly
yourself.
more help. Somehow. Somehow, maybe. Yeah.
Madeleine, about this data collection type of idea, would that be also useful for European cinemas at some point?
Yes, I mean, it's always a preoccupation how to source films and, you know, trying to find out where the rights are. But in the end, the obstacles are often more to do with the, if something is not in distribution, the fees that we have to sort of incur. But I just wanted to go back to what you said about the benefits, really, of cinemas working with other platforms and also working much more closely with distributors and sales agents. It is around, I think, going back to what Jean-Christophe was saying, is around the campaigns. And maybe we have to be more focused in how we do that. This idea of prototypes, so you're not going to solve everything, but through doing a series of very specific campaigns, you might get a lot more learning out of it on maybe some single titles, just following through all the way from production, all the way down to the cinema. And doing less might actually deliver more results in the end, because we're not asking our audience about everything, and the sales agents are not trying to do something crazy across 15 different countries. So maybe something like that. We've certainly got at the national level, I think there's some really interesting things that can happen between exhibitor networks and distributors. We're doing something with my hat as the BFI Film Audience Network, where we're working on 5 titles this year, where we're going to be supporting the distributors in their strategies and adding, I think, value, but more like knowledge, maybe on-the-ground knowledge to their campaigns. So we kind of complement what they're doing at the national level and do a lot of work in activating grassroots communities, and also doing some of the work that the exhibitors do and replicate across multiple sites. So I think that this idea of campaigns, but keeping it focused so that there's results at the end of it, could be interesting.
Quick follow-up with you, actually, Bobby, on this multi or cross platform exhibitors, theaters type of partnerships, and the way you could actually use or actually be one of the sources of this new repertoire. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's all of these best practices and networks are very important. I think, though, that to me, like data, that's obviously a huge issue, and I think maybe what's missing is some sort of incentivization to create, and maybe this project exists, so forgive me if it already does, but you know, there needs to be some incentivization to create real data sharing. Platforms like MUBI have a lot of information, and of course, adhering totally to data laws, which of course is privacy is very important, but generalized, anonymized data does exist, and particularly for, you know, niche festival type films, it's really important. And I think there could be a way, if it was incentivized, to, you know, create some sort of, as I say, real-time anonymized, you know, receptacle of data. Like I can imagine APIs, you know, if we could be convinced that others were on board and that there was an incentive to do it, as you know, MUBI and also as an industry, there could be a way to pool this information and have real-time, you know, API data being pulled, you know, out of these platforms.
But what prevents us from doing this right now?
Because this is really important to how we run our business, you know, and it has a great value to us. So there needs to be, just like, you know, why don't, you know, it's the same commercial questions. Why don't cinemas just play these films, you know, and the importance, of course, of having that assistance that makes the economics stack up, which means you can take more risk, you can take more chances, and you can develop audiences in a different way. So that's all I'm saying, is like we need to sort of, the same thinking that we used in the physical world, we need to start applying to the digital world and see if we can take the next step in terms of bringing this all together. And I wish I had I don't have an actual proposal, but I think there's something around that that's very interesting.
It's like duplicating or replicating what we're actually following across the distribution chain in the real world to actually import it online, right?
Yeah, okay. In a way, yeah.
Madeleine.
Can I just want
Sure, go ahead. No, it's working. Don't worry.
I just wanted to add, you just made me think of more data things. I think it's worth keeping an eye on the kind of ticket offers that are being developed by both individual cinemas and then chains or national programs. There's a number of young people's ticket offers that are being introduced, and also a number of cinemas that are investing quite heavily in CRM systems. And, you know, there's simple things that we can start doing as venues across the UK, for instance. We're looking at how we can use some of our box office data in relation to these new offers. It's quite simple, but we're able to often capture now new bookers within that age bracket. So we're able to say which young people are going to see which films under a specific age bracket, which is a little gold mine because it's not what you'd expect. And to feed that information back to the production funds, and even if it's only done around a sample of cinemas, but so you start getting a sense that actually the stuff you think you're making for young people isn't the things they're going to watch. And, you know, going back to Jean-Christophe's points about stars, and, you know, I think it's important to look. There was a study recently in France, I think the person is here that presented it in Berlin, that picked up on some of the motivations for people to go to the cinema, and we have to look at those quite seriously if we're going to create work that connects with audiences. The other thing that might be interesting to keep an eye on in the UK, we've the BFI film funds, through the BFI film network is very complex, is actually putting talent executives within cinemas such as Watersheds across the country. So we're now in a position where we can fund shorts and feature development as well. So that will be an interesting development because you will have that talent executive embedded within a venue and also starting to create links between maybe debut films that would have usually struggled with a talent tour with that new burgeoning community of filmmakers. Because it's not just audiences that, so we're in like over 650 cities, but it's also talent. How you find a talent, if you only have a very centralized way of that talent contacting you, you really limit your options. And you're not really activating the knowledge that is within those communities. We already know that there are interesting people out there that might make more interesting films as well.
Let's super quickly open this discussion with the audience, if you may. So if you, ladies and gentlemen, do have a question or reaction, please raise your hand. Wow, okay, I guess you definitely understood that networking also means bubbles and champagne, but we'll actually get to this point in a few minutes from now. So it's still time for a question if you want to have one. We do have a question, thank you so much. Oh, wait a quick second for a mic so that we can actually hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for the panel, by the way. It's been really interesting the whole afternoon. But I didn't understand what you were saying about the talent executives. How does that work?
So this is a really new program. There's been one announcement in Screen. BFI Network, which is the production fund for the UK, is putting talent executives, so people that will fund future talents within cinemas, such as Watersheds in Bristol, but also in the north. And that means the talent executives will be out in the region, and it might really change the dynamics. But I think that relationship between, you think of cinemas as, I think that's the way cinemas are always presented in these forums, as the end thing. Why not think of it as the beginning as well? Mm-hmm. We are spaces, we're hubs. In the cinema I work in, we fund VR, we have short film competitions, we host one of the biggest short film and animation festival, which is funded through the Creative Europe. So we have a community not just of audiences, but also of talent. And I think the more you bring these things together, the more success you will have in actually developing audiences.
Yeah, because we're actually referring to one part of the discussion with Jean-Christophe in the previous panel, but also the fact that one key driver of actually reaching audiences or having audiences coming on different screens to actually tackle content is definitely the talent.
And the relevance
of the talent. So there you go. We now have a tool for that. Another question. There is one question over here, and that will be the final question for this session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the panel. My name is Mariya. I'm from Russia. I'm a talent manager and producer. So it's some kind of the I'd like to continue the further question. So about a talent executive. So we got a short film in Cine Foundation competition. Our talented young director, Igor Poplouchin, you are very welcome to watch it, 16, 11. So, and for example, we already, of course, had our future project. So is it any abilities to like send some project to you? Are you interested in to get some foundation or not?
Come and have a drink with me afterwards.
Oh, thank you. I will. Thank you.
Perfect transition. Just so that we can actually wrap up this session, if you had one ingredient, one keyword, one takeaway for us to bear in mind from networking from audiences, Stefano, what would it be?
Data collection is based like the algorithm on the existing. We need to enlarge our audience. That's the key for the theaters, for the cinema, for everything. And I think it's education. So I always say it, 2 hours a week, every school in Europe, show them a film.
That's okay.
As simple as that.
As simple as that. Daniela, your takeaway.
put our energies together and stop thinking in borders, try to transgress every limit that you have in mind.
Break the silos.
I think that's for tomorrow.
Exactly, breaking the silos. Madeleine, your takeaway.
I think it's probably a controversial thing to think, but think less about the films and more about community design and community building.
Thank you very much. And finally, Bobby.
That's a hard act to follow. They said it all. But no, I think really our experience was, you know, don't be afraid of trying something new. Don't be afraid of the future. The next thing that comes along, exhibitors, producers, maybe is not actually there to destroy your business and what you do, but actually enhance it. So be open-minded, be flexible, and try new things.
Thank you very much for partnering and teaming up around this session for this European Film Forum. I guess they definitely deserve applause for what they've been doing over the past 60 minutes. I am definitely releasing you from duty on this stage because it's time to actually welcome on stage our final guest for his closing remarks, Giuseppe Abamonte, the Director for Media Policy at the European Commission for the DG Connect.
I would like to thank all the speakers, Marjorie, the moderator, and all of you for the rich and constructive discussions that we had the afternoon, and which will certainly feed into our policy agenda and inform our future actions, and in particular the design and shaping of the post-2020 media program. So as you know, the media program is built on two main pillars, so two strategic objectives. One is preserving cultural diversity, and the other one is the competitiveness of the European industry, fostering the competitiveness of the European industry. So notwithstanding the digital revolution, which has had a sweeping and devastating impact on the industry, on consumer habits also, the objectives remain valid. However, the objectives, if you want the media industry to thrive, they cannot be stated as abstract slogans or unquestioned legacies. They must be strongly anchored in today's market reality. So this means that, as announced by Commissioner Gabriel, the media program has to evolve together with its guiding principles. So we've heard today three things. So one is, three, how can I say, recurrent concepts. One is network and cooperation. The other one is audience. And the other one is, network, cooperation, and audience. So for cooperation amongst different players. So Daniela said that it is really key to ensure appropriate distribution along the value chains. Champagne can't wait. So a system, we have to put in place a system where producers, sales agents, distributors, platforms, and movie theaters work, so stop working in silos because it is not sustainable, but work more together. Technology has to be the enabler. So, for example, blockchain must be the uses, the practical uses of blockchain have to be explored, and data, of course. And we have to create strong incentives for people to share data and give access to data. So the idea of a stronger focus on network, using the success story of the European cinemas as an example, was discussed. So I think that in fields such as, and please listen to me carefully, because these are the ideas that we are now trying to work out in shaping the new programs. So I think that in fields such as festivals and VOD platforms, for example, there is indeed a way to reinforce the synergies amongst different players for the general benefit of the sector. There is in line with the fact that the implementation of media will have to be streamlined to increase cost effectiveness and reduce administrative burden, for example, by reducing the number of underlying financial transactions. Less transactions mean that grants would benefit more projects, pulling together several players who will have to work together better. So in other words, the logic of our funding schemes will necessarily push for more cooperation and, where appropriate, for more networking. As several speakers mentioned it today, promotion is also absolutely crucial and cannot be reduced to ex post, so production. On the contrary, promotion needs to take place as early as possible, so at the very early stages of production, and be embedded in all the parts of the value chain, for creation, script writing, to distribution and exploitation. Something which is very, very important is that, and I think that nobody can take an issue with this, so there is no cultural diversity and no competitiveness without an audience to enjoy the films. So a film which is not seen, which does not circulate, is neither good for cultural diversity nor good for competitiveness. So films have to resonate, especially within a media program, to a maximum possible extent with a wider international audience. Concerning media, you've heard the good news. So we are, at least in the proposal from the Commission, asking for a sizable, a significant increase in budget, which shows that which shows how much the Commission is attached to the audiovisual sector. And there is really good news. It's very good news for all the people in this room. In the coming weeks, we will also be presenting the Commission proposal for the regulation, which will be the legal basis, which will give more details on our future plans for media in line with the political guidance of Commissioner Gabriel. Of course, the final word is with the co-legislators, so we really rely on your help in articulating the case for more money for the media sector. So it will be our joint responsibility to prove, once again, the importance of media and the ability of this sector to make the most out of this type of funding, both in terms of contribution to the economy and reconnecting also the citizens with Europe, something which is very important. So to conclude, audience cooperation network emerge among the key words in today's discussion. It is easy to predict that it will also be the leitmotif of the negotiations of the next media budget. So you can count on our teams to defend this ambitious budget and count on you on supporting us in this task. Cheers. Please join me for a drink.
Thank you very much for this brief conclusion, and actually the key points, which would be the next element for the discussion. Actually, cocktail will be served in a few seconds, but you can just go on the terrace for some fresh air. In the meantime, cocktail will arrive, even though we already hear about the bubbles. Thank you very much.